Business owners, you need to get the word out. Are you looking for brand exposure, business expansion, looking for new clients, hiring remotely for staff positions, or hiring new employees to open additional offices? Are you looking to advertise new projects, start business partnerships, or seeking new business opportunities? Do you need to highlight new upgrades, features, or products? Promote up-and-coming events, seminars, classes, or celebrate business anniversaries and achievements with the world? Now's the time to get your commercial featured on my show. Send me an email for package pricing, and let's grow and expand your business together.
How my journey began. It's graduation time. Family is very important to me, including my puppies. The Marine Corps played a huge role in my life and allowed me to be ambitious, inspiring, a mentor, and achieve all of my goals. As a financial expert, I've received multiple awards, done various events as a guest speaker all over the U.S. with my platform of creating healthy financial habits, along with having my own business, all leading up to my show. Come along for the journey.
Hello, Gems, and welcome. Our final topic for the month of April, we'll be discussing essential workers and how pivotal they are to our society. Here are some statistics about essential workers. Just who are essential workers? They are frontline essential workers such as firefighters, police officers, corrections officers, food and agricultural workers, United States Post Office, service workers, manufacturing workers, grocery store workers, public transportation workers, and those who work in the educational sectors such as teachers, support staff, and daycare workers. So how do you know if your business is classified as essential? The Department of Homeland Security developed a list to help the country determine who is considered an essential worker. However, state and local officials make the final determinations for their jurisdictions concerning who is classified as an essential worker. The states with the most essential workers who are classified as registered nurses are Oklahoma, Connecticut, Vermont, South Dakota, Hawaii, West Virginia, and Maine. States with the most essential workers who are heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers, you may be surprised, are number one, North Dakota at 44% and are the top producers of nearly half the nation's wheat, among other grains and beans. And number two, the state of Wyoming in the food services industry. Now, the state of Wyoming has the highest rate of employment because it's home to over 1.5 times more essential workers than the national average. Here's a short list of essential workers that some people take for granted. These essential workers consist of janitors, gardeners, dog walkers, house cleaners, Meals on Wheels, grocery shoppers, food delivery drivers, babysitters or nannies, sanitation workers, plumbers, snowplowers, just to name a few. Now for today's guest. He has worked as an essential worker throughout his life. He's done 8 years in a health center, worked cleaning baby incubators and medical instruments. He's been a house sitter before and worked in a convenience store in the deli as well as a cashier. Two essential workers that he does not take for granted are food and grocery delivery people and medicine delivery workers. His favorite vice president is Joe Biden during the Obama administration because he really complimented President Obama and managed to accomplish a lot without outshining or upstaging President Obama. We'll get back to the role of a VP and how that kind of plays into the story of essential workers. If he could choose an essential worker career, he would be a general practice doctor. Some essential workers' careers that he thinks should not be replaced by technology are hospital workers, home repair jobs, and teachers. Let's give a fierce, fun facts welcome to my favorite uncle and your new favorite uncle, my Uncle Scott. Welcome to the show again.
Hi.
Good to have you again.
great to be here again.
Thank you. So we have a lot of things to discuss today. So let's go ahead and get started. So as I talked about before, essential workers provide some of the following: your joy, they provide comfort, connection, and necessity. They provide all of these things that we often forget about. We wouldn't function as a society well without them. So what about everyone else who deems their work as essential? For example, your flight attendant, airport crew attendants, because they are front desk, baggage check, your runaway workers. A lot of these workers, if we were to lose one of them, we'd be essentially losing 2 to 3 positions. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are this. They are very important because a lot of times people don't see what happens behind the scenes. Usually if we're talking, for example, about airport workers, oftentimes jobs like that, they're cross-trained. So if you lose one of those jobs, you're losing essentially 3 people. What people don't always realize is the person who's checking you in at the airport might also be the person who's dealing with your baggage that's going into the plane, might also be the person who's also your flight attendant on the same flight. So if one of them's gone, they're losing basically 3 positions in a day. So it's going to take that much longer to get your flight ready to go. It's going to hold up your flight. It's going to hold up your leaving the airport. And that may be why you're having your delays getting off of the runway, because all the baggage isn't in, everybody's position's going on. They're looking for someone to replace the person that's gone. And it's going to take that much longer for you to leave.
Absolutely, because you brought up a very, very good topic for that, is the cross training. They have these multiple tasks, and we'll talk about that later in the segment as well. But you're not just losing the one person, you're losing 3 people in one, and we forget that. This is the same person you've been seeing checking you in after you've done the long line, and they're weighing your baggage and they're asking for your ID, and then you're walking to the terminal and they're calling, the boarding sections. It's that same person. You lose that one person, you lose a whole lot. And I know we complain now about how long it takes to go through the airport. You lose some of those workers, and it could take a very, very, very longer time just because the personnel is gone. So obviously keeping that in mind as well when we talk about essential workers. So essential workers hold people together more than we think. So what goes wrong if your house isn't taken care of? Because, we talked about your nannies, your gardeners. So beyond housekeepers and gardeners who are paid towards to keep up your house, what are some other essential workers we don't think about?
We don't think about landscapers.
Yes.
We don't think about landscapers. We'll start with landscapers.
Yeah.
Landscapers aren't there. And you live in a house on a place where your house has to look good. Your house is going to look a mess pretty quickly.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
And you're going to have to try and find somebody. If you don't have them, then you may not have time to do it yourself. You may have it all set up where someone comes and does your house every 2 weeks because you are working all the time, or because you're dealing with the kids all the time, or you might be traveling for work all the time. And if you don't have your essential worker to come and do that, then your house is going to look like crap after a couple of weeks.
Yes, and for the some of us, some of the people who have HOAs, having your house look like crap is just not. That's not what it's about. You can't have you can't have your grass growing 2 to 3 feet just because you're used to your gardener who's now unable to do that, or because everyone else, maybe they're picking up some of the other workers. So instead of being able to do your house every 2 weeks, they're having to do your house once a month, or even less than that, just because they're trying to pick up the additional clients that they have that maybe others can't. And these are one of those things that you think about. Well, you don't think about, because you're right. You're off doing your career. You're off doing the things that you do. You fly, you come back, and your grass is cut. But when they're not there, they're not available. Now that's something you have to do. And I can say, even for some of my friends and myself, I don't own a lawnmower because I don't have the time to do it. I have to outsource. So this isn't one of those things that when I lose them, I can just go to Home Depot, buy a riding lawnmower, and take care of it. That's just none of the things. That's just not how it happens. And I want to bring up, oh, go ahead.
That you don't want a nasty gram from the HOA at your door.
No, you don't, and you don't want to be that house in a community that's an eyesore. Yeah, we don't want to be that. Another one that we just really heard about in the news are your dog walkers. We went through the case with Lady Gaga, and again, people take that for granted. When you're out and you're traveling, when you're gone for a week, 2 weeks here, there's someone back there taking care of our fur babies. You know, I love my fur babies, but this dog walker caught a bullet for her dogs. And so you go ahead.
I said, for real, Lady Gaga's dog walker who risked his life for these dogs. And he was in the hospital not too long ago recovering from a gunshot.
From a gunshot. So you can't tell me dog walkers aren't essential. Even before that, dog walkers are essential. And to tell you how essential the puppies are to her, she put up a reward to find her dogs. Because remember, they were missing at first. To find her dogs, there was a reward for that. And then, being able to take care of the dog walker and the medical expenses. But yeah, it's so important to remember these essential worker duties that we take for granted often, in situations until, this is one of the cases that it's made national news. And another one, go ahead.
I hadn't said anything.
Oh, sorry, I thought I heard you not, but your mobile services as well. Tell me about that, because I know you use a whole lot more mobile services than I do.
I was thinking about this, and I realized recently my life would cease to function in any kind of normal way if I didn't have my mobile services.
Right.
If I didn't have my mobile services to bring me my medication, to bring me my food, because I grocery shop online, and to bring me food when I order out, I wouldn't be able to do half of the stuff that I do.
Absolutely.
Essential. It is an essential service for people, because there are people who are incapacitated that need to have stuff brought to them. They wouldn't be able to survive without it.
Yeah, and the mobile service, again, that's one of those things that if we're not using it, we don't think of its importance. But when you do use it, you realize, no, I really do need this, because there's a ton of Americans who are unable to drive. They're not able to go out and get these essential items. So having someone being able to bring that to you. And I also want to point out, they're still bringing you these essential items, rain, snow, sleet, or hail. Because when people need their medication, they can't say, oh, you know what, it's a snowstorm. I know you need this medication every day, but may not be able to get to you till next Wednesday. No, they're risking, taking those risks to make sure their customers still stay on board with anything and everything they need, whether it's the medication, whether it's food, whether it's water. It's so essential. So definitely don't want to leave those out as well. So what happened when we don't have our essential workers? We went through COVID and we lost our essential workers, your teachers. People lost their jobs and weren't put on, and some who weren't put on furlough. Your janitors, your movie theaters, your workers, producers, script writers, all of these editors who flat out lost their jobs because we weren't going to the movies anymore. So what happens when we didn't have essential workers? We saw this in COVID, and these essential workers that sometimes we take for granted, your movie theater workers, producers, janitors, people who lost their jobs or were furloughed just simply because we weren't doing these activities anymore. One of the things we wanted to talk about is parents who were the teachers, until they figured out what to do. They were parenting and teaching from home while still doing their jobs. What's your take on that?
Oh, this has been a hot topic for everybody.
Yes.
A lot of parents really had to figure this out, because it was different when they were furloughed at home and they had their kids 24 hours a day, but they also were doing the kids online with teaching and doing a lot of teaching at home. They were seeing if the kids had behavioral problems, they were now dealing with behavioral problems and seeing it at home with their children.
Yeah.
They had to take on multiple roles now.
Mm-hmm.
They had to be teacher, they had to be disciplinarian for the parent, but they also had to deal with their kids getting exercise. They had to deal with how to keep their kids in contact with their friends even though they couldn't see them. They had to be cook. They had to be transportation, and they had to be all of these other things. They had to take on multiple roles.
Right. We saw a lot of parents become, as they say, household mothers, mothers or fathers, the stay at home. There we go. The stay at home mothers or fathers. Now everyone was doing that roles, but they were also, like you said, doing multitasking because they still had to be on their Zoom calls for their careers that are now turned to the Zoom meetings, and then taking care of your child and doing homework, making sure that they're logged on, making sure they're up, making sure, all of that. So it really put into perspective the role and the importance of having teachers, along with the multiple responsibilities that you mentioned. All of these things aren't going to take care of themselves. So now, yes, when are you going to have time to garden? And by garden, I mean just do basic landscaping, cutting your grass, because that person no longer can do it because it's not one of those things. When we shut it down for the COVID-19. So now it's on you. When do you have time?
Now a lot of these parents are going back to work, and they're still having the problem of the kids are in school, the kids are out of school.
Yep.
Sometimes they're in, sometimes the schools are closing down because they're having a COVID outbreak. So now they got to figure out what they're doing with their children.
Absolutely, because they're on the hybrid, maybe, and depending on the household, because not everyone has determined that their child should go back to school full time. Because so you can still do 2 to 3 days at home and 2 days at the school. So when they're at home, someone needs to be at home with them, especially if you have the younger age children. So it's still not back to full capacity. And, parents and your children still reserve the right to say, hey, I'm not ready for them to go back full time because the people are still getting COVID, and then they're shutting the schools back down because six feet apart just sometimes isn't working. And, we're cross-contaminating, until we can get the United States up to 80% of vaccination. We're still running into that cycle of open, close, open partially, close partially. Speaking of the United States, so I want to talk about another important role that I mentioned during your intro. So when we think of supporting roles, a good example is the role of the vice president. The VP is an officer in the legislative branch, and as the president of the Senate, in this capacity, the vice president is empowered to preside over Senate deliberations at any time, but may not vote except to cast a tie-breaking vote. So have you thought about this role as a backup or supporting role? Because sometimes we don't. We're always thinking, especially now, our VP, Madam Kamala Harris, like, how come she's not talking about this? How come she's not talking about that? And we forget that's not her role. That is not her role. So what is your take on this?
It's funny because I was guilty of doing the same thing not too long ago, where we've had the trial of Derek Chauvin going on. And I was like, well, why haven't we been hearing from Camilla about any of this? And I had to be reminded that she is the vice president. It's not really the vice president's role to speak out on these things. It's the vice president's role to support the president in speaking out on this, should he choose to do so, which he did.
Yes.
And the vice president's role is really a behind the scenes role. They're there to support, and they're there to do whatever their role is to do. They're assigned to do other things. They're assigned to be their support system, not as the main voice.
Right. Yeah. We forget they're not the main focus. They're there to encourage and support the president's agenda. They're there, and they're not even there to play cleanup. And I think that's what, people were thinking when the president may say something. It doesn't have to be this administration. It could be, we've seen it with other administrations before, when the president may say something in communication and, the public goes outroar. That's not the VP's role to say, hey, you know what, let me clean that up a bit. That's actually the press secretary. That is the press secretary that comes on and says, he didn't mean it that way. What he meant was yada, yada, yada. Or, we apologize if we've hurt any feelings. That's the press secretary. That's still not the VP's role to come and clean up anything that happens. And with that supporting role, you're not the main focus. So I definitely wanted to add this in there because people are like, we don't see Madam, Kamala Harris. How come we don't see her? Well, when you think about, you've had this conversation, when you think about past VPs, you really didn't see them as much either, because they're not in the public face as we think they should be, or we have this, misconception that they are. They're really that supporting role. Again, talking about those essential workers and roles that they do so much behind the scenes, but they're not seen as much.
They're really not, because we really didn't see much of Mike Pence during the Trump presidency. We saw Trump and we saw the press secretary, and that was pretty much it. We didn't really see much of Mike Pence until things really ran off the rails near the end of the presidency.
And that's seriously, that's when we really saw a lot of him. And when we did see him, he was behind the president in a supporting role, clapping at rallies. When he was doing the speech, he was, again, behind the scenes. And because that's their role. It's not because, they don't want to or they don't have a voice. Oh, they have a voice, but it's just not their role. So I definitely wanted to add that in there so people can know, hey, when you think someone isn't paying attention, they are. They just understand the importance of their role. So another essential worker that is often taken for granted is the role of entertainment managers, assistants. Would you not agree?
I would definitely agree with that.
Because I'm telling you, these artists, they run their assistants and managers ragged. We've all heard some of their stories where it's like, OMG, like, what don't you do? I mean, they keep a good schedule. They book events. They're publicists. They provide all those fun statements where they say, Miss Robinson is doing fine now. She would like to have this privacy to herself to cope with the stressors that are going on in her life. That's the publicist. That's the manager. That's all these roles. What is some examples that you have?
Okay, the biggest example that I have of this is I have said that I think whoever manages Jennifer Lopez should be making mint money, because
right,
in the news every single day of the year, no matter how small it is, no matter how tiny it is, every day we go and we hear something positive about her.
Yes. And again, that's part of her contract for whatever he or she, don't know who her manager is, but that's their role to make sure, hey, she has that exposure going on with her. But that's a role in itself, to take a situation and say, well, she's doing good. Look at her. She's on the beach. She's doing amazing things. She's continuing on with life. Somebody is keeping up with that narrative and making sure that it goes out there. They're also, another key thing, they're sometimes part of hiring and firing personnel. Like, they're coming and going, and when we don't see it, but behind the scenes, there's a whole lot of movement just to keep that entertainer being able to do what it is that they do on a full-time basis.
It's amazing when you see how it happens. And there are other stars out there too. We're always hearing good publicity about them, and they manage to keep it going for oftentimes years throughout their entire career. You're always hearing good publicity about them. They're never out of the spotlight for long. They've always got something new going on. That's what good management is.
That is a good manager. And again, someone I can't tell you who their name is. I can't point them out in a lineup of 20 people, even 2 people. It's a 50-50 chance I'll probably get it wrong because they're so behind the scenes yet essential. So what are some of the downsides to some essential workers? I know you and I have talked about it before, just to name a few. They're underpaid and often overworked. They give up a portion of their life to be with your lives. They travel often. What are some of the things that come to mind for the downsides of being essential worker that's taken sometimes for granted?
One of them would be that there isn't often many options for advancement. That usually, if you're having that position, the only options that you have are to create your own business from it, or to do something different.
Yeah.
You innovate within that type of position, or to leave it.
Absolutely. Or start something else. I also want to point out their healthcare and insurance often not provided. They sometimes have to get that on their own. They can get fired and or replaced without notice. Like, that job security is often dependent on the client and the client's needs. So if the client moves and you're not moving from California to, say, Colorado because your family's in California, they're going to have to get somebody else in Colorado, and that person may not be you. They may be downsizing for you to taking care of maybe 3 of their homes, and now they're downsizing to 1. They don't need you very often to take care of whatever it is. And it doesn't mean just house cleaning. It could be the chauffeur. It could be, again, dog walkers. They don't need that. It's also current and dependent on their environment. So we've seen, just speaking about the entertainment business and a lot of the their managers, when we've all seen the entertainers that say, I'm going to take a break, right? I'm going to go away from Hollywood for 2 to 3 years. Well, they don't need that huge team anymore while they're on break for 2 to 3 years or 4 because they're home. They're like, it's going to be me and the kids. So they don't need you as often as they did before. So that can, decrease the amount of times that you are working. Also, the current federal minimum wage across the United States is $7.25. That is the minimum. Now, often other people do get paid more than that, but there is no time equals money. So you could be working 80 hours of the week, cleaning and doing the nanny, doing all this. There's no like, okay, well, I should be getting close to $40 an hour. They don't have to pay you that, again, if you don't belong to a union or something. So those are some of the downfalls of that when you're kind of working for yourself and at the hands of the client. Anything else you want to add?
If they're not innovating, they're not going to be able to make much more than they're making. Like, for example, if you're a dog walker, maybe you come up with a new type of leash to use for the dog. That will be your new way of making money. You're coming up with a new device. You're coming up with a new piece of. You're coming up with a new device. You're coming up with an innovation. That's going to be how you're making your money, other than doing the dog walking, or unless you create your own dog walking business.
Right. And that leads me into our next one. How can essential workers grow their services? So again, you mentioned that, starting their own business, collaborating with others, growing their own client base. So nothing says that, while you're doing this, again, you could be doing other stuff on the side. And another good one, you said being innovative, you're right there. I always say there's probably someone in the sanitation business that thought of the garbage can lid, because way back, the lid of the garbage wasn't attached. It was one of those lift up ones. And now they're like, you know what? I think we should have it attached and we could put wheels on there. Someone came up with that. We take it for granted now, but someone said, how can I make this easier? We have, stuff like the Swiffer jet. Like you said, walking the dog. You're with the dog all these hours. You may notice, what? They can have a different harness because, when I pull back, they don't need to snap the dog's neck to do that. Let's maybe more mesh. And now, there's a plethora of dog harnesses, but you as the primary person in these essential jobs, you can be so innovative because you're there. You have all the, what if this was like this? This could work better if. And, I would dare say a lot of these essential workers are sitting on a gold mine of ideas.
Absolutely, they are.
Good. Anything else that you can think of?
I would say maybe something in finding an upgrade in the technology.
Yes.
That's another way in which they could be making more money.
Absolutely. And, another thing that you brought up, technology, and I just thought of, being able to take your business from just face to face and taking it online. And we talked about that in one of our early episodes, probably January, about being able to go online, being able to market yourself, create your own websites. And yes, you may have this one idea, but boy, oh boy, you take that and you go online and you make your own website. You could eventually be able to open up your own business. And that's part of that, being innovative and using other technology to get ahead. So I like that. It's good. All right. So gems, it's time for your financial gems for today. Your financial gems are: have a backup career in case your current job gets replaced by technology. We talked about that a lot. Ensure that you budget and get healthcare, life insurance, and disability insurance for yourself as well as your family members. Again, these essential workers, if you go out, you're just going to get replaced, but we want to make sure you have the care in order to continue on with your job. Know your emergency financial plan in case you find yourself not being able to work. I know throughout this COVID, it's affected a lot of people, and a lot of people didn't have that plan B, plan C, plan D, because we were just 100% on the first career. Now we know we need to have that backup financial plan. Also, keep an updated resume. Keep an updated resume. Just because you started working 2-3 years ago doesn't mean you can't keep an updated resume, because when you need to start looking for jobs, you want to just be able to click and drag that resume as opposed to taking a few hours to update it because it hasn't been updated for a while. And your final gem for today is know how to report unfair labor practices. And I can't harp on that enough, because a lot of times in these essential worker fields, especially ones we keep saying take for granted, you got to know your rights. And if you're working too much, you're not getting enough sleep, you're not getting enough time off, know how to report those unfair labor practices. All right, Jim. So it's our show custom to have every guest provide our gems with an inspirational quote. Favorite uncle, what is your inspirational quote you would like to share with us today?
This month's quote is from Mahatma Gandhi. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others.
I like that. So lose yourself in the service of others. Again, find yourself as well, losing in something that you enjoy doing. So thank you so much for being a guest, being my favorite uncle, and being in our show and part of our journey today.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time as usual.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Jims, creating healthy financial habits is a lifelong commitment. Remember, without change, there be no butterflies. Changing habits, changing lives, and changing futures are all up to you. Till next time, Jims, take care.
And what else? That's it. I'm an asshole. It's got to be more to it.
But there always is more behind the story. I mean, you can't just come out and just say you're an asshole without giving a reason why, because there's always two sides to the story. Like, maybe you don't think you're an asshole.